Welcome everybody to the Dev Talk Show here on May 13th of 2024. And so, once again, I'm Chris Gomez, and you can see my co-host Rich Ross is just right across the screen from me. And hopefully everybody else is having a good Monday morning wherever you are. We are going to do something interesting today. If you've looked at the show title, it says that we are going to introduce a Git repository called BlazorAuthFromScratch that has been, some folks have already found, and we've talked about. It is it's on GitHub. It's under the Dev Talk Show organization. I'll need to get a link to that, and we could post it in the chat and get it in the show notes and all those things. So
is that under your account?
No, it's under the Dev Talk Show's account. I'm trying to pull it up here so that I can, share it on the screen. But hopefully, okay, here we go.
Auth from scratch. Cool. Okay. I got a link to it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So anyways, sorry for that little bit while I was just trying to find it. And we'll get that into the comments, so people watching. So what is the purpose of that repo? It's been following along with the sample project that we've been doing for quite a while now, that started out server side, where we were committed to using the Blazor template, but without the authentication setup, without the individual accounts choice for authentication, and still adding authentication in after the fact. And we've gotten to the point where we've done a few things that I think are kind of interesting. Is, first of all, adding that support in from scratch, I think, is a confidence builder, that you don't have to make that choice up front with the Blazor web app template and feel like, oh, we didn't make that choice. We got to go back and start over and copy our code and all that stuff. The second is that I think it gives us some confidence about what it's actually doing under the hood. And so that way, if you want to make changes, but what if you want to use the big template? That's fine. If you want to use the template that has everything built in, including email authentication, storing password information safely in a database. It happens to be using EF Core, but supports both SQL Server and SQLite. It's SQLite. It's not. Yes. It's not MySQL. I think it's SQLite. Yeah, I think it's SQLite.
Yeah, SQLite, because that's in memory, right?
So yeah. Well, it's an early Monday morning now, so my brain's already. But SQLite's the one that's database local file versus MySQL, which is another open source. I mean, obviously there's still files, but it's server based. So, and then the other thing we wanted to tackle was the external auth piece, where, because many of us, including me, don't really want to handle the password scenario and say, listen, I just want everybody who comes here to have a Google account, a Microsoft account. Maybe they can use, there's some other stuff in the box too. And when I say in the box, like there's packages ready to go that for many different sites, including Twitter and Twitch and so on. And there's documentation on how to do that. And then we went one step further and said, well, that Microsoft example isn't bad, but what if I want it to be limited to a single tenant in my organization? And how do I do that? And so that's another piece that it covers. So what we have now, let me see if I can bring up a sample. Okay, Blazor Auth reference. Let me run the app, because what we're going to do over the next hour is it's about an hour. Yeah, we're about an hour now. Let me share the screen here. Okay, so if people are wondering what we've done, this is it. We are starting with the Blazor template, no doubt about it. We didn't make any changes to these pages. And One other interesting thing here is you'll notice both the home page and the weather page support logging in. That's not like, none of this is to represent how you're actually going to set up your app. It's to represent that these are components. This is a component. Whereas in the templates, you get a login page. Now, I don't have anything against the login page. And having done this project, I'm a little influenced now. At first, I was dead set on, I want this to be a component so you can log in from every page. And I still feel pretty strongly about having that ability. But I also now see the value in having one single login page. And then maybe what I've noticed other web, because now I am noticing what other sites are doing. I'm a little bit more in tune. And some very big important sites out there, in the upper right hand corner, they'll have the little place to say log in. And sometimes you can log in right there. And other times when you click there, they just redirect you to a page. So they've centralized it. And, you know, I that's not bad. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I was just really at really gung ho at the beginning of this, of like, I want a component and I can use it everywhere. And then I realized there's subtle issues with that, because I might want it to look different here and I might want it to look different somewhere else. So it's hard to say. So, you know, there's a lot going on this page. For one thing, you can log in just with your name. And that may be real off-putting to people that are watching this for the first time, saying like, well, wait a second, why would you ever allow someone to log in with just their name? And it's like, because we were demonstrating how to sign someone in with ASP.NET Identity. And I deliberately wanted to avoid the nitty-gritty details, which is like, oh, now go look up the password, and oh, make sure it's hashed, and make sure it's salted, and make sure it's stretched. And I wanted to avoid those details, which it sounds like it's an interesting show. But just making the point that you, as the developer, are in control of when to sign someone in just by calling sign in async.
Right.
And providing a claims principal. You provide those two things, they're signed in. At the same time, we know that people might want to use their Google account. They might want to use their Microsoft account. And in our case, we wanted it to be a Microsoft organizational account. And we have an Azure AD that I showed, and we have a couple test accounts in there that are basically ready to log in with. So
cool.
Yeah. So this all works. The key is let's see it work on both pages. And then, you know, I actually should open this in a private window, mainly because that way, when I run this in a private tab, it will not get confused about the Microsoft account that's logged in. So I say log in with Microsoft, and it says, oh, well, who should you sign in as? And I think we're going to find out if I've got both of these users totally set up. In my Azure Active Directory, or the Entra ID directory, is spaceshot.net, and I've got a pretend user, and they've got a pretend password.
We'll pretend to remember it.
Well, that's the trick, right?
Right.
Action required.
That's a good sign.
I don't really want to set up Authenticator, though. I really just want it to work. So what if I go back? Maybe it's the other account that I don't have this issue with. Okay. So let me do that again. And it's not that that's a bad issue. It's just that I don't really feel like setting it up here. So I have a second account. These are both in my Entra ID. And this one, or do they all have to be?
That it would show that QR code or have some way of doing the authentication bit.
Sure, right. So here we go. I'm authorized. I'm logged in as test user. You're logged in from a Microsoft account. And now notice this very same page has a logout link ready to go. Yes, I would like for that to be in a less conspicuous place. But if I switch over to the weather page, it's still, the components still show the same thing. So I can click log out and boom, click log out and I'm back here. And now I could sign in with a different account, or I could just sign in with my name. And literally that's all I need to do is use my name. And it says, okay, you're logged in as Chris and you are logged in from our own internal user management.
Nice.
So what we're going to do is we're going to contrast that real quick with folks who are you're watching the show right now, and you rush up to the GitHub repository, and you're like, oh, that's sweet, it's so awesome that this is here. And then you bring down the branch and bring down the main branch, and you say, wait a second, what happened? Where's the external stuff? And it's because we have to add this to the GitHub repo, and hopefully we can do that in the next hour here.
Okay.
And we can, send up a nice commit and be done with that. So, all right. Let's see where we're at. Bring this over. Here we are in Visual Studio. It's been a little while since we've done a show where I've been in Linux, huh? It's been a little while.
You want to add another variable here? Are you
not going to do it
now?
today? No, okay. Not going to do it today. No. This is Visual Studio.
That's a lot for a Monday show, to be honest.
Yeah. I think it'd be nice to do, but not today. And so,
Okay.
we only added this stuff here to get authorization and authentication going.
Yeah.
And then we added this little bit here, map identity endpoints, which is not magic. Like people say, oh, what does that do? It's our own code. So when I say go to implementation, we are going to go to a identity. We're going to go to this identity endpoint extensions CS. But the important thing to note is this is our code. This is code that I specifically wrote. And so, and all it does is it provides logout. So if we walk through it very quickly in program CS, go ahead. I might get back to your answer, but go ahead.
So some of that, that map endpoints was code that got injected, but we put the login piece in there as well.
We put the logout piece.
The logout piece, yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for folks who've been watching this series, they'll probably note that like we have been diving into the template code, and then like sometimes even stepping beyond it into framework code to figure out like, well, what did they do? What are the methods they call? And so the way this works is for folks that are watching, this is a little it's very deliberate code, and it's very explicit code. You don't necessarily have to be as explicit as I am in all of the parameters being passed, but some of that's a little bit on purpose so that it's very clear to everyone what's happening. And so we add authorization, we add authentication, but when you add authentication, we also do add cookie, which means what we're saying, and it does say it here. It does say what it's doing here in the tooltip. Adds cookie authentication to Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication, the authentication builder, blah, that was a mouthful, using the specified scheme. And all a scheme turns out to be is just a string. You can put anything you want in here. And if you've been looking at the Blazor templates, they put a constant in that's like default scheme.
Okay. Yep.
And in my case, I just called it TDTS cookie for the DevTalkShow cookie. If you're watching and you say, I really hate that you put a string in here, why isn't it a constant so that you don't have to go change it 50 places? I'm with you. I'm with you. But to make it very clear for the viewers, for the person learning, it says right there, TDTS cookie. And so that enables authentication. We've chosen the server authentication state provider, which is the same one you will get if you create a project that has no interactivity or has server interactivity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it takes to make login available to you. The next thing you have to do, though, is you actually have to log people in. And so on our homepage, we are using the authorized view component that's built into Blazor. And it even says right there, displays differing content depending on the user's authorization status.
Yeah.
So if you are authorized, you see what we're showing, which is says, hey, you're authorized and you're logged in. And we go ahead and we pull out the user identity's name. And this context variable that's available to you in your Razor markup is not an HTTP context, which might be surprising to some folks if you're used to coming from Razor or from MVC. This is a authentication state context. The parameter is actually of type authentication state. It is not of HTTP context. And that's important because in some Blazor scenarios, especially the interactive ones, you don't have access to HTTP context.
Right.
So we, early on in this series, you probably remember, we injected an HTTP context and we were just going to town with it. But that's because we were being pure server-side rendering.
Yes. Yeah,
and that's not going to, it's not going to work for us long-term. Yeah.
No.
So like people might say, well, where does this come from? Well, it turns out you're not seeing it injected. It's just part of the base component. So we all have access to the authentication state, and we could interrogate it ourselves to figure out if somebody's logged in, but we have the authorized view component that does that for us, shows which content that we want. And if you are not authorized, then we show a component called the my own login component, named kind of very, I'm not asking anyone to name it that in their actual apps, but that way we all know. It's very clear. This is stuff we built.
Yeah.
Built a login component that has a login form or a set of forms, and we built a log out component that really doesn't do much more than, let's find, where are the components? Oh, here they are. Oh, my logout got pushed under pages. That feels like a mistake. That feels like I didn't, maybe that feels weird. Like, why is that here? I think I goofed here. I think that was supposed to be out here. So if I move it, now I wonder if I've done anything interesting. So the my own logout component does basically say, okay, all it really does, the only thing it's really meant to do is just give you a link that allows you to click and go to /account/logout. That's it. That's all it does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually not even sure why we have this. It makes me wonder if there was, I don't remember why this code is here. It could have been a show where we were trying to examine something. I'm not even sure if it's necessary. Maybe we'll look at that in a little bit. And our login component has a form, and it's because it's server side. Intentionally, we supply parameter from form. All this form does is take your name. That's it. Puts it into a model. The model down here only takes name. In the future, we could add password. We could add other things to this credential class. We could move this credential class out somewhere else. Doesn't have to be here.
Doesn't be there. Yeah.
Yeah. And all you have to do to log someone in ASP.NET is, if you have an HTTP context, which we do have in this case because we're a server-side form, and by definition, login has to be server-side, because otherwise, if you're client only, how do you ever authenticate?
Right.
So we are okay with getting an HTTP context, and we call the sign-in async method, which is really an extension method that comes in ASP.NET Core Authentication. You call sign-in async. What auth scheme are you signing them in for? And we keep using TDTS cookie everywhere to say, hey, we're creating a claims identity for that scheme. We're signing in for that scheme. Here's the claims principal. The claims principal has a claim in it with your name. That's the only claim in it. You can add many other claims here. And now now that we have that claim, that's how the rest of our code says, oh, your name is Rich, your name is Chris, whatever.
Exactly. Speaking of names, welcome, Waleed.
Oh, awesome.
Hello, everyone. Yep. Glad you could join us this morning or this afternoon or wherever you may be.
Yeah, that's right. So this code does not do as much as we saw the other code do. The last thing that we haven't talked about yet are these identity extensions, where we're now in the same project, along with Blazor Web, the Blazor Web app, we are also using minimal APIs to create an account group of APIs. And one is called Logout. And the only thing Logout knows how to do is it knows how to sign you out. That's it.
It's named.
It knows it knows how to sign you out. That same auth scheme is popping up again. And then we return. One thing that you can do in ASP.NET Core is you can return typed results which instead of me just sending back like 200 or me doing all the hard work to set up a redirect, there's already a typed result called local redirect that's already here for us. And it's got a lot of great options. And basically, I'm telling it, here, go back to the home page after you're done here. So that doesn't bring in the external auth, which I believe is what we'll add today and then get pushed up to the repo, I think.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, we can start very quickly, I think, with Google. And then we'll add the Microsoft one. And we should, we might run through this a little quickly, but that's because we want to make sure we're done by 9, I think. So.
And it's video, so you can always go back.
That's true. You can always pause and add yourself and take a look at what's going on here. And let's see. I want to bring up, let's see if I can find the learn Microsoft.com documentation for this. Yes.
The external.
No, that actually wasn't it. Yeah, the external auth. I know it's in the Blazor section. So here's what we'll do. We're going to open the docs. So the docs are open. And I'm just going to type Blazor up in the title here. Oh, it's not going to be an Entra, is it? So if I go back to just learn and I say Blazor, that's close enough. I just want to be somewhere sitting in Blazor because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to find in security and identity, or am I not going to find it here? Security and identity, authentication. I feel like I know it's in the ASP.NET section. Is this it? Oh, no, this is it. Yeah. So the external authentication provider, we have shown this documentation before. Here's how you set up Google, and it's pretty straightforward. And here's how you set up Microsoft. And again, pretty straightforward. So for folks looking for this, we'll make sure to get it in the YouTube show notes. But we know how to do this already. So what we do is we add on to the authentication. We've already said that we want cookie authentication. It'll be interesting to see how much Copilot helps us here. So I say that I want to add Google. And actually, it's going to fight us a little bit because right now, I still think Copilot might give me, okay, I gotcha. It's not totally wrong. Although what I really want to do is say options. And see, you know why it's fighting me? Because I haven't added a key NuGet package yet. So the IntelliSense is saying, I don't know if that method even exists. Maybe you mean this other method. So I go to manage NuGet packages and I'm browsing and I say, let's see, the package name is, I think it's authentication.google. Yes, this is it right here. Microsoft ASP.NET Core authentication.google, and we'll install that. ASP.NET Core middleware to support Google's OpenID and OpenAuth. Okay, so once that's done, I can come back here and now say add Google. And I'm going to say options. And it's still kind of fighting me a little bit. Let's see. So the options that I want to add is we're going to need a client ID and a client secret, if I remember correctly.
And I think it's what it was trying to prompt you with.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Let's give it another shot. Oh, I see. It's weird though. Yeah, it did the client ID. I guess that's fine. So options, let's see, we've got a client ID.
You're also missing a curly paren.
Oh, yeah. You're right. I need one
Just
of those,
because it'll
right?
help with the IntelliSense, that's all.
Yep. Okay. Now, I need the client ID. I need the client secret. What I'm not sure is if I need anything else. Right. So I still have to go add those secrets in.
Yeah.
And so I want to get these from configuration. Oh, and that's actually pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So now the question is well, where do these come from? And let me just double check that I am not going to. I'm probably going to switch. Let's switch away real quick. Just because I want to make sure that I don't accidentally, although it's easy to do anyway. I feel like I do it all the time anyway, which is accidentally expose the secret we're working on, and then I have to go and kill that later. So I'll bring that back up. Oops, I'm trying to add to this. There we go. Okay, so now the question, if you're not sure where to do this, we talked about it on the show before, is really, I don't want to store this in app settings. I don't want this to accidentally get committed to source control. So I'm going to say manage user secrets, right click and say manage user secrets, where I get the secrets JSON that's far, far away from anything that I have to worry about. And let's see, if I look real quick here, this says, I'm going to add a little bit more to this. I'm going to say authentication.
Okay. So this is a flattened version of the nesting that we'll wind up doing inside of that JSON document.
That's right. Yep, that's exactly it. So I'm just, oh, I love how it tried. That was nice. That was a nice attempt. And then I am going to have to head off screen to paste these in.
Yeah. So before you paste it in, this is the structure that we're going to use, and we're going to do the same thing with the client secret. And I'm going to swap you out so you are no longer on screen.
So it looks like that. Yeah. I was just going to show what it looks like.
Oh, are you ready? I can do that.
Yeah. I'm not pasting in, but I was just going to say, here's what the setup looks like before and after, except that you got to paste in your client ID. You got to paste in your client ID and client secret.
Yep. So
and then that's authentication, Google client ID. It hops 1, 2, 3. We go to the secrets JSON 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then what I'm going to do now is so I'm not going to be able to go back there for the rest of the show. And that includes when we add Microsoft, right? But everybody sees how to do it. Okay, so let's do that real quick. Or did you take care of it?
Yep. And Chris is getting that information from an app registration that you've done with Google as the identity provider, right? So you've got to essentially register that you want Google to authenticate people inside of your application.
Right, exactly. You go to their Google API dashboard, and then, we even did the, I don't remember if we looked up the Entra ID stuff on the show. We might have. Okay, so we're good.
Okay, I'm going to bring you back on.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. So with that done, let's see. There's more to do, though. There's more to do. That just, let's see. That adds the Google external ID. Right? I actually think that it might generally work. Oh, well, we don't have a login component that displays it. Yeah. So actually, we're not there yet.
Oh, because right now we're only set up to do the cookie authentication, not a Google authentication.
Right. Like we don't have any way, we don't have any code that says, okay, now somebody wants to actually do this. What does that look like? We don't have that. So what we're going to do is we are going to create another component, and that way we can have it on multiple pages. And I think if you as you follow along, you may later realize you probably don't have to have 2 components for this, but I think just for again, to be very deliberate.
Okay.
So we're
That was
creating.
what I was going to ask. Like, if we can authenticate with multiple identity providers, we shouldn't have to inject the right component at time. It should just kind of understand which you're authenticating with.
Yeah, like we could wrap this into our main login component.
Yeah,
that's a good idea, I think.
Well, ultimately, yeah, I go down the path you're going now, but because I think there might be some nuances here. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I think it's a good point. So, oh, that's not what I wanted to do at all. Okay. So in order to do this, we're not going to need any of this. We don't need what comes with the component. What instead we're going to do is say, hey, you can log into this with your Google account, and we need the Annie4Tree token because this is a form. Not 100% sure what else I'm missing here. I may be missing some.
You got a div without a beginning.
Yeah, that's true. So I know what the issue is I needed a lot more than I copied. I need this.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
Yeah, so in order to do this, I'm going to have a little heading that says, hey, here's the Google external login section, and you can log in with your Google account, and we're going to create a form that posts, and it's going to post to yet another minimal API that we have not yet created, a minimal API that's going to be know how to do the Google login. So any form in Blazor, we're going to want the Annie forgery token. If we take this out, we're going to get an error, and that's how I always remember to put in Annie forgery tokens. I injected the navigation manager, which is a Blazor component. And the reason why is because the navigation manager can tell me what my current URI is so that I can pass that along in the form as the return URL so that we can tell Google where to call back to.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of indirection there. But now this form is going to let us at least attempt to log into Google. And then what will happen is, but I'm not actually using it anywhere. So let's go add it to the home page. Let's see, where's our home page? Okay. We've got the my own login, and we can say, let's underneath that, let's put this, the Google external login. And now I think this will try to work, but it won't actually do what we want, because when I say login with Google, remember that endpoint that it's going off to, that it's trying to submit a form to, doesn't exist.
There we go. Yes. Which we knew we didn't create. Okay.
Yeah, we haven't created it yet. So if I go to the identity endpoint extensions, these are our extensions that we created, I'm going to say, we're going to add another endpoint. So in our group, in our account group, we're going to add perform Google login. And I get a little bit of spacing here that I want to kind of clean up, so that we're basically saying, okay, just like we said, the form is posting in HTTP context. And also let's get from, the form is posting a return URL. Let's get that from the form. But let's inject into our minimal API, let's inject an HTTP context, because we need that in order to sign in and out.
Sure.
And again, we need to now set up something. We need to set up a challenge. And this challenge comes as a typed result, just like local redirected. So challenge knows how to do an OAuth 2 OpenID challenge. It knows how to do it, but you have to fill it out with some information. You fill it out with authentication properties, which is a whole class that has more than just the redirect URI, but that's all we need for this case. Yep. So I'm filling it out by saying, hey, the redirect URI came from the form. It's wherever we were. Then you also have to pass it an array of providers, and we only want it to care about one provider. So we created a string Google, and then we said, here, throw that string into an array. using a somewhat newish C# feature. It's not really that new anymore. So all you have to do is from a minimal API, if you return a challenge result, then it invokes challenge async, which you could do manually if you wanted to, but it invokes challenge async to call, and it'll create any OpenID challenge. But the way, how does it really work? Well, it uses the providers, and then the providers are tied into the NuGet package that we added, and that's really how this whole thing actually works under the covers. So at this point, I should be able to say login with Google, and we blew up. No auth scheme was specified. Okay, so that makes me wonder, what did I not do? No auth scheme was specified, but I said sign out. Perform Google login, perform Microsoft login. Oh, I think I know what it is actually. Okay. And this is a good learning step. So when we added a cookie, we specified the auth scheme for the cookie right there. Yes. But if you look carefully, there is no default auth scheme specified for Google.
Oh, good point.
So I think there's a couple ways to do this. The way I did it to get this working was putting it here makes this the default auth scheme throughout, which now begs the question, could I throw this out? Maybe I could. I also think that I could do this here, because this version of the overload takes an auth scheme and then takes the options.
But do you want to call it cookie, or is it TDTS Google?
Well, so that's a good point, right? In my implementation, I am using the same cookie for all of them.
Yep.
The templates do not. The templates use a different auth scheme for external than they do for your own. This worked for me, so we could have an interesting conversation over whether you should or should not do it this way. Like, what is the upside and downside? Oh, well, that already blew up. That's a scheme already exists. Okay, so now that just answered a question of mine that I did not. Now I know why. Well, yeah. So I got an error saying scheme already exists, but if I put it up here, this worked fine. See, it lets me do that. I think that's very interesting. And now I can log in with Google
too, because the cookie had the same as the default. Interesting.
No, I agree, but I'm looking at the reference code that I used to get to where we're at, and I can log in. So this particular account is already logged in with our Google account, and that works. And I can click this over and over, and it works. But if you don't really have faith that they're actually logged in, and I'll admit that I was kind of one of those people, I said, like, oh, how do I know? I know that seems kind of weird. Is well, for one thing, I want to get a claim from them. And I got the name claim from the provider, but let's get another claim from the provider. Let's say that what we're saying here is there are claim actions that you can declare as part of options to say when the JSON data comes back from OpenID Connect, from the Google OpenID Connect, and every provider uses different claims and different keys. And so you kind of got to do a little research. Is they return a key with your Google account picture as a URL.
Okay.
So if I say map that JSON key to our own claim called picture with the value of URL, then take picture to use that as the value, as the field, and take the URL as the value, then it will map that into a claim that we can go take later and save off in a way. Like, I don't know how else to put it. It's it saves off and maps for us a claim that upon sign-in will be added to the claim's identity. So that feels like a little magical in a way, like, oh, it just knows what to do there. So what we can do is we can say this now. if I go back to the, let's see, do I want to do this on the home page? Let's try this on the home page real quick. I don't think it's going to blow up. But what we're saying here is, I think I need to, do I need to do this? No? Okay, it's complaining because it's not in an authorized section, I'm sure. So let's add this here. Oops. That was my mistake. Bad paste. Okay. If we find a claim of type you are in Google Picture, if we find one that was mapped for us by that previous line of code, if we find that claim, then let's show the value of the claim. Let's show it.
Okay.
And it's just a URL that Google will accept. And I believe Google has a policy that they want you to create this link with no refer. And if you do that, then I think if you take that out, then I've had trouble getting the picture shown. But when I've left that in, it's been a lot more consistent. So in fact, it's been consistent. So let's see. I come over here. I say log in with Google. And there we go. There's our account picture, right? With a little semicolon that must have been added. Yeah. Let's see. What did I do there? Is it that I did not need this semicolon? It's possible, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. Is that, and I haven't done this on the Microsoft side yet, but I would like to. I would like to map the picture, get that, pull that down, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've added Google, and that works. Now let's add Microsoft in. And in order to do that, we need to go back to Program CS. And well, for the first thing is we learned our lesson last time that we need to first add a NuGet package.
True.
Just like this installed authentication Google, there is also an authentication, and I think it's Microsoft account. Let's see. What is this package called? Yeah, it is called Microsoft account. So there we go. Okay. Middleware that enables supporting Microsoft account authentication. Now, what makes the Microsoft account authentication a touch trickier is this same package supports both signing in with just a personal Microsoft account, like something that I might use for Xbox or Office 365, that maybe family, Office 365 family maybe, or just my own Microsoft account that represents me. This same package supports organizational accounts, which might be your organization at work or at school or something like that. So I will admit it's a little confusing. Just to me, it was anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say add Microsoft account, and it's pretty much doing what I want here. That's pretty much it, except there's going to be a couple more, and we don't have to switch yet because first I want to double check. We are going to enable this for the organizational accounts. If you want to enable this for a personal accounts, you want to allow personal accounts, this is all you have to add to your program CS, to your options. You got to give it a client ID. You got to give it a client secret. Then you go to Entra ID settings in the, there might be other places to do this, but you go to Entra ID settings in the Azure portal and you create an app registration and you say that app registration allows personal Microsoft accounts. And now your app can sign in people with their own personal Microsoft accounts. That's what the documentation shows you how to do. And it's great. But I had this use case of I want to sign in people at work.
Yes.
And it turns out in order to, go ahead.
Because your previous statement about doing the app registration in Entra ID and allowing both personal and work accounts would do just that, right? So you can, as long as you had one of those two, you could sign in without any issue.
Right.
And I think there is, I will look it up. There's a separate place for getting app registrations against the public accounts, just like there is with the Google, like app Google accounts, right?
You're talking about what are the endpoints?
Well, a different place where you would do an app registration, right? So let's say I have an app where I just want to let people bring their public account, Hotmail, Outlook, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't need an Entra scope to go ahead and put an app registration against. There's a separate public place
endpoint
where that registration happens.
You know, I'd love to know where that is, because I will admit that the way I did it was I went through the Azure portal.
Sure.
And like you said, if there's another place to say, hey, I want to be a developer, I want to get a client ID and client secret for the common endpoint, which are the endpoints you now see on the screen. Copilot threw in the common endpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And that works for you. And if you follow, and you know, what really will confuse the heck out of you is that you look at the documentation and it says, hey, add a client ID, a client secret, but that documentation is setting up for an Entra ID that accepts both personal accounts and an organizational account. But if you want it to be strictly limited to the organization, that endpoint changes.
Yes.
You don't use the common endpoint anymore. And I'm going to go add this to secrets, but your tenant ID goes here. I'm just going to, just so it doesn't show funny colors.
Sure.
You get your tenant ID, which for me was a GUID, and I think is for everybody, but just so in case this sometimes changes in the future, I don't see why it would, then the video is still relevant. So you put that here, and now that's the big issue that'll happen is if you go to Entra ID, you create an app registration and you say this app registration is only for this organizational tenant. It is single tenant, and you don't adjust these options, it'll crash and you'll just be scratching your head going, I don't understand. Why is it why won't it sign me in? This is the piece. This was the hurdle that I had to get over. So I am not going to leave this here. We're going to put it back in secrets, but at least everyone got to see it, what it looks like. And if you're just testing around on your local machine, you know, you don't have to rush to the secrets right away. I recommend that you do before you commit to your repository, but you can add stuff here just to see it work. Okay, so let's get these set up.
All right. Do you want me to switch screens?
I just want to show everybody that's what it's going to look like. And then, yes, now I'm going to head over to secrets and add those in. So I was just double checking if you switched it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you have. Okay, great. Yep, it's just a little delayed on the other screen. So I'm doing manage user secrets. And we're going to add the Microsoft secrets in, which I can do pretty quickly, and save and close that. And so that's it. They're gone. Thank you.
I bring you back.
Okay. So I've added a Microsoft account. That's great. The other thing I need to do, at least, and you know, I think in a future show, we can talk about how we really want these components laid out. But let's go ahead and add a Microsoft. Let's add a Microsoft external login component. And again, I think there are good discussions here to be like, how do you really want to do this? And maybe the answer is different for your particular use case. I don't want to say that we absolutely know how to do this. So you're going to find something very funny in this one. I wanted to prove to myself that I was passing the current URI. So I have this little bit of code that just says the current URI is the navigation manager. And I think the reason why was I'm not even 100% sure why I needed that. There could have been some reason, but let's see what happens if I leave it like this. Okay. So just like the Google example, we are calling our own minimal API that's built right into this application, and we are sending the return URL across, just like the previous time. And we're just basically letting people know you can log in with your Microsoft account. So now that I've done that, we're going to go back to the identity extensions. This is going to look really familiar, and that is a great use case for saying, hey, I want to abstract this code out so it's a little bit more consolidated. But like I've kind of said all along, I'm purposely being very deliberate with this. so that it should be very clear to everybody what's going on in each of these use cases. So perform Microsoft login takes the same thing, context in a URL. We inject the context. We get the URL from the form. We set the provider to Microsoft. We say that we're going to sign out any existing cookies just in case they're already signed in as something else, just like we did up there. And then we challenge. I mean, it is identical code, so it could clearly be refactored.
Yeah, but we just want to get this working.
Yeah, just want to get it working. And at the same time, I think it creates a lot of clarity about not app. I want to go to the home page. So on the home page, I've got Google external login. I should now be able to add Microsoft external login. If I could only type today, wow. There it is, Microsoft external login. Thank you for that. And let's see, is there anything else, or are we good? Or are we ready? I'm going to bring up, so I've got my DevTalkShow version that is showing the logo. I want to bring up a private window because of everything we talked about being an organizational account. It will confuse it. In fact, I mean, let's just see what happens, just so everybody can see. If I click log out and I say log in with Microsoft, then I went somewhere. In fact, I think, I'm not even sure what happened. Oh, okay. So here's why it blows up. It says that user account doesn't exist in the Entra ID, right? The application that you said you were taking accounts for. And I just think there's just what happened is my browser tried to find an organizational account because it recognized that it was looking for one. And it's just kind of complicated. So because my example, and I want to make it clear, this example is not enabling personal Microsoft accounts. The moment that I put in a token endpoint and an authorization endpoint with a specific tenant ID, the personal Microsoft, and then you got to go to that app registration, and that app registration is for a single tenant. I'm not allowing personal Microsoft accounts in my example. Your configuration will allow you to accept both. As Rich said, we could probably look up how to allow this without going through the Azure portal, right? That's just the way I knew how to do it. So if I say log in with Microsoft, and then I got to go back to my IDs, I have a test user in that Entra ID that's in the domain, so to speak. And I can log in with a username and a password. And it's going to say, do I want to stay signed in? And just don't show it again. And I don't know if that's really going to work. But the point is, you are logged in as test user. So I can log in, I can log out, I can log back in. Interesting. It saved. Remember how I said I didn't want to be asked for my password? So it remembered it. Log out. Microsoft logs me back in. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. In my example here, we are not adding this to the weather page. We left it only on the home page. So the future of this was that I took this login stuff and wrapped it in a bigger component so that I could show it on both pages. But you don't have to do that at home. Really, the idea here is to show that you have the freedom. You want to accept an internal login? Great. You don't want to accept it? I mean, all I have to do to not accept it is come in here and just take out my own login. Let's comment it out. And now I'm only accepting external logins, which may be the use case that you want. It's certainly a use case that I don't mind too much. You want to log in with Google. Okay, you're logged in with Google. And I know it's you because I got your picture. And what you now have to do as an app developer is take that login that comes back from Google. You get an ID for it. And now you need to go store it somewhere because I need to persist my own application settings for you coming from Google, right?
Makes sense.
Google's not going to do that for me. But I get an ID from your Google account. I go store that in a database. And I say, hey, when this Google ID comes back, this is the account with these user settings. Who knows what they are? I figure out what their role is. And that is all application specific stuff. But what I've enabled here is if I don't want to allow Google anymore, then I don't need this. And that's part of the component-based view in some ways. At the same time, now you might be asking yourself, now hold on a second. Why did the templates in Blazor not do this separately? Well, they have an external login picker component.
Mm-hmm.
And that external login picker looks through the registered auth schemes. Every registered, what it does is, this is one reason why they do use a separate auth scheme, the external auth scheme, is they register the external auth scheme for all of these accounts, and then they can count them. They can say, so tell me all of the registered auth schemes for external. And they go, oh, well, there's one for Google, one for Twitter, one for Microsoft. And they go, okay, well, let's show a button for each one. Right. And then when you click on it, we send you over to that. We challenge with that provider. And it's a little bit more generic and agnostic, which is not bad. It's just that I think when you're trying to understand how this stuff works, that seems a little magical.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. I'm not saying you shouldn't implement a login picker, or in fact, that you don't take theirs and strip out the stuff you don't want and just run with it. I am not saying that. But after you take that external login picker, your next head scratching moment is going to be, well, wait a second, it's calling all this stuff and it's blowing up and it's saying endpoint not found. Well, that's where you have to add identity extensions that it's going to call. Well, I shouldn't call them identity extensions. You need to add endpoints that it's going to call, whether those endpoints are right here in the app, which I don't mind so much, or if you said, you know what, we want to separate this responsibility and have it in another, fine, you could do that. There's no reason you couldn't do that.
Yeah, because I'm sure if this probably is not the only application you have where you're doing those kind of things. So centralizing that bit of functionality and making it available to all the apps.
Yeah, right. So we got a few minutes left, and we had a question here. And I know Waleed has been asking a lot about using JWTs instead of cookies. And so the question is, what type of authentication method would you recommend for a project that combines a Blazor Net8 project, Blazor hybrid, and shares components using a Blazor Razor class library, JWT or cookie? Now, I want to avoid sounding like very prescriptive, but I have very recently, last 6 months, been very influenced more towards cookie-based authentication than just a JWT. And the reason is because if your client app only stores a JWT somewhere, the question you now have, and whether that's an access token or maybe a refresh token, which is fine, the question you have to now ask yourself is, where am I going to store that in the client's browser? And the options aren't great. Local storage, I don't want to say cookie because that's different.
Yeah.
And local storage is one place. There were some other places too, in memory caches. Like there used to be other places, a lot of places stored in local storage. Now, I'm not going to tell you that storing it in local storage is inherently bad. It certainly means that somebody could just hit F12 and pull the item out of local storage. But a very astute person would say, why can't they do that with a cookie as well? That's true. But we're going to make a presumption from a security perspective that if I'm sitting at my machine and I hit F12 in a browser and I pull that information out, that information identifies me anyways. So if I try to call APIs with that cookie, with that token, what's the difference between doing that and using the web page? Except for the subtle thing of I might start some kind of DDoS. So you got to defend against that. But in the end, if I were to just do all the hard work to pull that refresh token out and manually refresh it and manually make API calls that your app was making anyway, there's no security problem yet. The security problem comes in if your application has a cross-site scripting vulnerability. Because now I can inject malware that malware will then go pull the token out of local storage from my own remote attacking machine, and now I've got the refresh token.
Yeah.
And I can refresh as you as long as I want. And the worst thing about it is the server can never know. It can't possibly know. Like what, oh, refresh token? Okay, here's a new access token. Here's a new refresh token. Here you go. So if you're really astute about this stuff, you will also say, well, wait a second, cross-site scripting is a problem even for cookie-based authentication. And that is true. That is true. With cookie-based authentication, if I set my cookie to be strict HTTPS, then what that does is that prevents JavaScript from accessing the cookie. So that same external malware, it can still come in and act as you on your machine, but it can't ask in JavaScript, it can't ask for the cookie to go squirrel it away remotely. It can't go squirrel it away. It can still do bad stuff in your name, in your browser, but only as long as you're logged in. So this is called the session writer problem. The session writer problem pertains to every website that's ever existed. If I, as malware, can infect, I don't want to say infect, if I, as malware, can trick you as the user into using a site logged in as you through a cross-site scripting vulnerability, if I can do that as an external machine, I can write along in your session as long as you are logged in. That problem is not necessarily solvable by anything, really. So we still, as developers, want to avoid cross-site scripting in our libraries and whatever we choose as libraries and in our own code. We absolutely want to avoid it. But the problems multiply in access token and refresh token authentication, because now I can, as the intruding malware that's tricked you using an XSS vulnerability, I can now write some JavaScript to go interrogate your local storage and say, do any of these look like refresh tokens? Let me just grab everything in local storage. Let me grab everything in IndexedDB. Let me grab everything. I'm just going to grab it all. In fact, why don't I just start pulling the JavaScript source, whatever it takes for me to try to find the refresh token so that remotely I can refresh as you and just stay logged in as you as long as I want. So that's subtle, but it's the reason why I have kind of been gravitating towards cookie-based auth, even in client applications. But I'm not going to tell you that many sites don't use access token or refresh token. It is still very popular, and they take the burden. And I don't want to make this sound bad, because that's really kind of it's making a little bit of a mountain out of a molehill. But they, as the application developer, are taking the responsibility of preventing XSS. But we all have that responsibility anyway.
Right. And I think on the token side, you also have the ability to go and say, sign me out everywhere. That's one thing.
So yes. Did you say on the token side or the cookie side? You said token. Yeah. So on the token side, you're right, is that if you as a user clicked logout, now what the server side has to do is think through all the threat models of, when somebody says logout anywhere, should we invalidate their tokens everywhere? Which is I think it's a good practice. I suppose somebody could come up with a security scenario where they say, I feel like logging out here, they wouldn't feel like they were logged out on their phone. So maybe we shouldn't invalidate that token. And that's fine. You just got to think through the threat modeling.
Right.
Of, well, that's a different token, so it's okay. But somebody logged out here, we should invalidate that token everywhere is fine. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You could also do that with timeouts. You could say, hey, if they don't do anything in 10 minutes, we invalidate the token. So,
and then the other thing that's good practice on the token side is to do the second factor of auth.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The multi-factor auth. It's just that when you implement refresh tokens, you have a little bit more of a security posture of saying, okay, where did the refresh token, where is it getting refreshed from? Where is it being used from? Do you want to lock that down to IPs? Because you could lock that down to the same caller, but that might be a little weird. There might be some funny use cases where, hold on, they switched networks. They wouldn't have expected to have been logged out. All they did was switch from the Wi-Fi to their 5G provider, and now they're logged out. So, and I like I said, I think it could be making a little too much out of it. There would be plenty of people who very rightly would say, hold on, you still have problems with cookie-based auth. Don't try to make it sound like it's superior and it's better, and you can't have any, you have issues. You want to know the same problems. If somebody logs out here, what does that mean? Do you want to invalidate the cookie so that they can't switch to the other tab and keep working? Those are all really important and difficult security issues to think through. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer, but I think it's a good conversation, and I'm glad that Waleed brought it up. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a good way to sum it all up, right? You really have to understand what it is that you want your application to do and all the potential loopholes or security gaps that might exist.
Right. And so the trick is, as a developer, it's very easy for us to do some things I've noticed. And this is just from my career. It's very easy for us to kind of always think about what we call the happy path, is that A is going to lead to B, which is going to lead to C, and that's great. And because of our distributed world where we're constantly calling servers here, there, and everywhere, we actually have to think about failure first. Is when I make this call, what happens when it fails? Well, what do you mean when it fails? It's a bad call? No, the server's gone.
Right.
Like, let me start with that one. The server's gone. My electricity went out. And I know that sounds like kind of basic, but think about those issues. Ask yourself, how should my app respond? And perhaps the answer is as simple as you show a little disconnect icon and say, hey, we can't reach the server right now. But have you thought about those issues so that you can react to them, instead of what likely happens in a lot of apps is just boom, and an exception page. And wait a second, are you exposing your exception pages to prod? And maybe you don't realize you have. And the way you go through all these issues is one by one. You just say, what is the first way this can fail? Let's test that. What is the second way this can fail? Let's test that too. Bad authentication is the second way this can fail. Okay, how do we respond? What does our client do? That's a lot of hard work, though. And it's so easy to not do, because you can get a long way in this world implementing the happy path, shipping it to production, and just letting the support tickets roll in. You can get a long way in this world. And so, unfortunately, it leaves us developers with kind of a bad reputation, right?
Mm-hmm. Throwing it over the wall. Yeah. No, that's a good walkthrough.
Yep. Cool. So I'm going to push this right now while we're getting ready to go here up to Blazor Auth from Scratch. And let's see how this looks. Blazor Auth from Scratch. We've got, look, it gets telling us that we've got some changes, which is great. And so we're going to go ahead and just add them somewhat blindly. They're all the changes we made today, so that's good. There's no secrets.json in here, so that means everything I did means you add a secrets JSON file, you add these components, and you're good to go. I think I might have accidentally, you know what though, before I actually do push this up, I'm going to do it offline, because I just realized that we were messing around a little bit and I commented some stuff out.
Yes.
So I'm going to get that stuff uncommented. I'm going to make sure that gets staged as well, and we'll get that up there for everyone to review and use. And
awesome.
Yeah. Make sure this builds. But that's it. That's it for today. Hopefully everybody appreciates and gets some use out of that, and we're going to continue adding to it. And
I think, I mean, just look at if you're done. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep. No, you're good.
So yeah, and I think for the rest of next time we're gonna be able to get together on Friday. We'll probably go back to doing looking at Aspire a little bit, kind of shift gears, because there were some things that when we went through it last week, we definitely want to take a further look at and dig into. And so that's what we're going to plan for Friday's show. We'll put something up on the a placeholder up so that people can be aware. But thanks, Chris, for running through that. That was awesome. Continuing that authentication discussion. And so we're running a little late. We'll get you over to stand up. And for everybody, Chris, my name is Rich, and we'll see you hopefully Friday on the Dev Talk Show.